I'm excited today. We have Noah Goldmann, policy analyst with Rewiring America on the Nerd Show. Welcome to the show, Noah.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're talking about electrification, right? But what in particular are we going to talk about today?
So Rewiring America, my organization, was founded on the premise that we actually do have a solution to the climate crisis. And I can walk you through that a little bit. So when we think about what's causing the climate crisis, we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions. When we think about greenhouse gas emissions, almost 90% of those emissions come from the energy sector, and the rest maybe comes from agriculture and refrigerants. But the energy sector is almost the entire problem. So that sort of brings good news and a big challenge. So the good news is that we know how to decarbonize the electricity sector. So for around half of those energy-related emissions, they come from the electric grid. We know how to decarbonize. So the price of solar has fallen by tenfold and then by tenfold again over the past few decades. Renewable energy is set to become the largest source of energy worldwide by 2025. So that's the good news.
We know how to decarbonize electricity, and we've got the technology to do it, and it's available and inexpensive, and maybe we can do it over 10 or 20 years if we put our minds to it.
Yes, exactly. That's the wind at our backs. The challenge, though, is that around half of our energy-related emissions come from directly burning fossil fuels in our homes, buildings, and vehicles. So if you think about it, even if we get rid of all the utility-scale power plants on the electric grid, we still have those little power plants in our homes and our vehicles that are burning fossil fuels directly. So that's the big challenge, but we also have the technology needed to decarbonize our homes and buildings. So that's why Rewiring America was founded, to electrify, starting with our residential spaces, so our homes, our apartments, to decarbonize, and then that together with the clean grid, decarbonization plus the clean electricity grid can get us around 80% of the answer to fighting the climate crisis. So it's really a pretty optimistic story.
Yeah, hang on a second.
Are you getting the book?
I'm looking for the book. Electrify Everything, An Optimist's Guide.
Yes, our founder, Saul Griffith, wrote this book that's basically offering a solution to the climate crisis. So it is an optimist guide. It is very optimistic, and it really gives us a great goal to shoot for, because people don't take action when they think that a problem is unsolvable. But if we're offering a solution that is not just good for the climate, but good for folks' pocketbooks and their health, then that's a much more attractive proposition.
Yeah, so we're going to electrify everything. The easy part is electricity, the relatively easy part. And then now we're going into homes and worrying about heating homes and vehicles and all that.
Yeah, so the good news there is that Congress just passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And to give you a little bit of the scale of what needs to happen by 2050, which is when we're hoping to reach net zero, we're going to need to replace or install around 1 billion machines over the next 30 years. That's a lot of machines. But the good news there, again, we're all optimistic here, is that each of those machines that we currently have, so the gas furnace in your basement or your current internal combustion car, is going to reach the end of its useful life before 2050. So that we have that opportunity at the end of the life cycle to replace our appliances, our vehicles with electric alternatives. So the Inflation Reduction Act, this awesome piece of legislation that President Biden signed back in August, is going to go a long way towards making those electric appliances the default replacement option, so that by 2030, every replacement is an electric appliance. And I can talk to you a little bit more about the details of what the Inflation Reduction Act has to offer.
And you say we have 30 years to install these billion new machines? So it's only like 30 million a year. I mean, it seems like a piece of cake.
Yeah, it's a steep challenge, but the good thing again is that we're not asking folks to go wholesale and replace all their appliances today or next year. It's really about replacing appliances when they die, when they break, things like that.
And part of that's we're going to need the clean electricity on the supply side of the grid to help make this work, right?
Definitely, yes.
So what is Rewiring America doing to help people figure this out?
We've released a few tools and tricks and guides to help folks navigate the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. So what the Inflation Reduction Act does, it's this big piece of climate legislation. And in effect, it's giving every American household an electric bank account. So every American now has, on average, $10,000 in federal money to spend electrifying your home, your car, things like that. So those incentives come in a few different forms. There are rebates, there are tax credits, depending on your income and building type, et cetera. So Rewiring America made a few different things to help homeowners, individuals navigate this landscape of incentives so you can take this electric bank account and start to spend it and start to get the dividends of electrifying. So I can actually share my screen and show you some of the things that we've made. Here is our incentive calculator for the Inflation Reduction Act. So all you need to do is go to rewiringamerica.org/app/IRA calculator and enter your household information. So we're asking for your zip code, homeowner status, household income, because some of the incentives rely on things like household income and where you live. And then you'll be able to see exactly what incentives you can qualify for. So for example, I can change this zip code to my home, and then the total incentives available to me reach almost $30,000, including $14,000 of upfront discounts to electrify. So that's discounts off the sticker price of a heat pump or of a heat pump water heater or an induction stove. And then there are also many thousands of dollars of tax credits to go to heat pumps, but also electric vehicles and rooftop solar. And then it also shows my estimated bill savings. So not only am I getting so much money upfront and through tax credits to electrify, but once we do electrify, we're reaping around $1,100 of savings each year after that. So you can scroll through the calculator and see exactly which incentives you might qualify for, when they're available, everything like that. If you click on an incentive, it will show you more information about that specific machine and about the costs and incentive structures. So it's really pretty cool and very useful. And we've already had over 300,000 Americans calculate their incentives using the calculator.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've recommended this tool to so many of my friends and family because it's really cool to see sort of the free money that's available to us to electrify.
What information does the tool have about me or you? Like is it just what you put in here above the line?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're asking for the zip code and the income primarily because the upfront discounts rely on area median income. So that's how you qualify. It's based on the median income in the area you live. So that's why we ask for your zip code and income. And then some other tax credits like the electric vehicle tax credit, for example, depend on your tax status and income as well. So we're just asking for this information, but we're not collecting it or anything like that.
And then when I actually start sharpening my pencil and looking at, what a heat pump is going to do for me in terms of savings, someone needs to know what my existing, am I using gas or oil, and some details around that. So is this using kind of generic, kind of general information and averages?
Yeah, so this is using pretty generic information, but we have big plans to build this out into what we're tentatively calling the personal electrification planner. So we want to gather and present a lot more information to individuals and to households to show based on your exact situation. So based on what your furnace is and how old it is and information like that. We want to be able to tell you both what incentives you qualify for, but also how you should think about your electrification journey and which appliance replacements you should prioritize and when you should think about doing that. So we do have big plans to make the electrification journey as easy as possible for as many households as possible.
Yeah, because I don't want to pull out a gas furnace that was just installed, a few years ago. We didn't do that, but if we had, because you want to get them at end of life, right? Or do the rooftop PV when you're more or less when you're going to redo the roof and things like this. So there's a whole coordinating and planning ahead aspect to it that seems really important.
Exactly. Yeah. And that sort of is a great segue to two other resources we have available. So I'll just show off that we have a guide to the Inflation Reduction Act on our website that offers case studies for 4 hypothetical families that do electrify their homes. And so you can see what that might look like in practice, how you can electrify, how you can make a plan to electrify. And then we have an electrification guide for homeowners written by one of my awesome colleagues. And so this really gets into the nuts and bolts of what electrification will look like on the ground in your house, how you should interact with contractors, how you can pick a good contractor, and helps you start to create a plan, because making a plan is really the most important thing that you can do today. Because as I said, we're not asking people to do wholesale replacements of the appliances in their households, but when an appliance reaches the end of its useful life, you want to make sure that you're prepared to replace it with an electric alternative. So the last thing you want to happen is for your gas furnace to, let's say, break in the middle of the winter and you call up the contractor and the only thing the contractor has in the back of his truck is another gas furnace, because that locks in emissions for 20 more years and we can't afford to do that. It also locks in, indoor air pollution and all those other bad things. So if you have a plan and you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, or like with me and Jeannie, where we wanted a hydronic heat pump in order to use our radiant coils in the floor and the radiators on the walls in our house. And then, it turns out the only place you can get those in time to install them is a warehouse in Canada or something. And so you have all kinds of annoying supply chain issues at the moment.
Right. So I can also talk about some of the things we're doing to make sort of the heat pump the default on the back of the contractor's truck. But in the meantime, yes, it's really important to make sure that you have a plan and that you sort of know what your goal is so that when it comes time, you can achieve that goal.
We had 4 guests on this nerd show who have done significant electrification of their own homes. It was Quentin Zondervan, a Cambridge City Councilor, who's been very active personally and politically, professionally on electrification. We had Sue Reed electrify her Brookline house and walk us through things. We had Asa Hopkins, Vice President at Synapse, who's electrified his own house. And then Wutai Kwok, who is done a significant electrification that is pretty interesting. Those things I'm talking about are without the subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act and without the tool that Rewiring America has built for us to use. So it should be easier now and less expensive. In fact, it seems like on a lot of these things, there's significant savings. Is there anything else that you and Rewiring America are doing that you want to tell us about today?
It all comes back to making electric appliances the market default. So half of that equation is the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act and at the state and local levels. But the other half of that equation is aggregating local demand to make sure that we're sending the right market signals. Rewiring America is working on a new initiative that we're going to roll out throughout this coming year called Rewiring Communities. And this is our effort to sort of create those local playbooks and bring together local partners to aggregate marketplace demand so that a contractor knows that the appliance that he should be carrying on the back of his truck is a heat pump and not a furnace, and that the big box retailers know that they should be stocking induction stoves and not gas stoves, and that manufacturers even know that they should be making heat pumps here in the United States to further drive down costs. So I think that aggregating that demand and sending those signals will sort of take us where we need to go in terms of making those electric appliances the default going forward.
Do you picture those aggregators being like nonprofit community group type organizations or ruthless, greedy capitalist enterprises that are trying to ramp up and make a buck installing heat pumps or both?
So I think that we want to sort of bring all parties together in a way that aligns a bunch of different incentives. So I'm sort of imagining a city where both the nonprofit community-based organizations, but also maybe the local universities and the local utility and maybe even the local sports team is sort of all on board with selling this electric future where local companies can invest in community electrification and local organizations can increase consumer awareness. And so we're all pointed in that positive direction.
That's great. We here in Cambridge want to be on the bleeding edge of that.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that the Boston Red Sox, instead of investing in carbon offsets halfway across the world, can invest in community electrification to clean the air like right there in Boston. So I do think that you can be there on the vanguard.
So Noah, thanks for being on the show and thanks for all the work y'all are doing. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's really exciting to get the chance to tell people about it. Thank you.